viewers, and welcome to your guide for the Survival Hunter from patch 7.25 onwards. This is intended to be a basic guide just to get you started along the way to the biggest overhauled spec in Legion, obviously going melee now. And I've looked at it a couple of times, done a couple of videos on it. One of the initial problems it had, some fixes that came after that, and it still has its problems, unfortunately. I would call it a work in progress rather than the disaster it's kind of known as amongst many communities. But having said that, it has built up a niche community of people who very much enjoy survival, so maybe that's for you. Fun tidbit, survival was always supposed to be melee. I'm not sure if many people know that, but it was. Originally in vanilla, Lacerate was actually the 31 point talent. It was supposed to be melee, and then Blizzard realized very, very quickly that they couldn't make it work and switched it over to the range spec we knew about for many, many, many expansions. So without further ado, let's look at how best to get going with this thing and getting used to it. So what is the Survival Hunter all about? Well, as I say, it's a work in progress. So what you're going to find is your DPS is heavily skewed to 1 or 2 spells, but that doesn't mean that it only has 1 or 2 spells. In fact, quite the opposite. Once you get a little bit of gear on this thing, you are going to be very, very busy trying to keep things going. So in the basic sense, we still have our pet. There we go, Mr. Cheeky Paws. We have a bleed effect called Lacerate that I mentioned in the intro. We have something very, very similar to Kill Command, which is Flanking Strike, which causes you and your pet to attack. We have Explosive Trap, which we're going to be making good use of. And then our main thing that we're going to be doing is Mongoose Biting. Yes, we have this Mongoose Bite, which stands at a standard 3 charges. So what happens is we're opening a window. Whenever you press Mongoose Bite and you have no stacks, I'm not talking about these stacks, I'm talking about this stack. As you can see here, I have activated my Mongoose Bite window and it starts ticking down. And the whole idea of survival is to put as many Mongoose Bites into this 12-second window as possible, and then it'll run out, and then you start again. That's pretty much the process. So as I start pressing Mongoose Bite, as you can see here, I get 2 stacks, 3 stacks, yeah? And if we keep it going, you can see you also have chances for Mongoose Bite to proc. In an ideal world, you're aiming to get 6, right? You're aiming to get 6. Once you get 6 stacks, like you saw at the end there, you can activate your artifact ability, or you can use it to its maximum effect, is a better way of saying it, which is Fury of the Eagle. Furiously strike all the enemies in front of you, dealing big physical damage. Damage is increased by Mongoose Fury. So every time we press Mongoose Bite, we start the Mongoose Fury window. And again, like I said, what we're trying to do is get 6, because that's when our Mongoose Bite, every stack of Mongoose Fury we've got makes Mongoose Bite hit harder. Okay, so it'll very start quickly. You can see it starts going up and up and up and up and up. And then when we've got 6 stacks, you can go, oh, Fury of the Eagle with the 6 stacks to do maximum damage to capitalize it. That also kind of extends the window of Fury of the Eagle, by the way. So after your Fury, Mongoose Fury, well, it extends the window of Mongoose Fury, so when you come out of Fury of the Eagle, you can actually slip in a couple of more 6-stack Mongoose Bites, yeah? So that's the general go-to idea. You're going to keep your bleeds up, you're going to be using your focus on Flanking Strike for the most part, and then using Mongoose Bite to do the big, big damage. What you're going to see is when your damage breakdown comes in, is that Mongoose Bite accounts for something ridiculous. It's like 80% of all your damage is just Mongoose Bite, and then we have all these extra buttons that we have to keep going along with, all right? So let's take a couple of look at the passive so you can understand what's going on here. So one of the passives is Waylay. Is after 2 seconds, your traps become fully armed, making them especially devastating. All right. And then we have Survivalist. After you kill a target, you and your pet gain 15% health over 10 seconds. And our Mastery. Our Mastery is the important one. Your pet's attacks have a 10.5% chance to grant you additional charges of Mongoose Bite. I want you to be very, very aware of what this Mastery is. So we can stack that. The more Mastery we have, the more chances that our pet attacks are going to cause us to get extra charges of Mongoose Bite, okay? Very, very important that you understand that. So let's take a look at our talents and figure out what we're going to be choosing here. So a big problem Survival has is once you start getting better gear, you're going to just be completely overwhelmed by things that are sitting off cooldown, ready to be used, which is something that in every other spec in the game, besides like healers, is a bad thing. You don't want that to happen. But with Mongoose Bite, that absolutely can, with Survival Hunter, that absolutely can and will happen. So moving up as your gear gets better and you get like more mastery, so there's more mongoose bite procs and stuff. So let's talk about stats. Your main stat you're going to is haste. You want more haste, you want as much haste as you physically can possibly get, right? It's generally always good. After that you want mastery, but only to like 20%-ish. You could judge it based on just how many mongoose bite procs you're getting, because what you can absolutely do is end up with just too many. You just can't get rid of the fucking things. And when I went with a heavy mastery build in Nighthold with our survival hunter, absolutely felt that happening, especially with the tier bonuses then. It was just overwhelming. You just had mongoose bite up all the time and no time to do anything else, which is no good place to be. And after that, your stats kind of even out and rebalance, and that's when you're getting into simming things and legendaries start coming more into play and that kind of thing, okay? So that's what happens at later game. But to get started, get yourself as much haste as possible and start working on your mastery so you're getting more mongoose bite procs, so they're stacking up and doing all that big damage, yeah? So at level 15, let's talk about Way of Mok'Nathal first. So this idea of being overwhelmed with buttons is going to be pretty prevalent. So another spell that we always have access to is Raptor Strike. You might remember it if you ever played a Hunter a long, long time ago. It's a two-handed melee attack. It's 25 focus. It's a vicious slash that deals some damage. So one way of thinking about this is a dump, a focus dump. Okay, so our flanking strikes on cooldown. We can't mongoose bite. We've got lacerate ticking. We've got our traps down. What do we do with all this extra focus is you can dump it into Raptor Strike. Well, if you take Way of Mok'Nathal, you add yet another buff. Now, a lot of people call survival spinning plates. Yeah, we're spinning all these plates and try and keep them all going. And Way of Mok'Nathal is one of these things. So Raptor Strike also grants you Mok'Nathal Tactics, increasing your attack power by 3% for 10 seconds and stacks up to 4 times. So let me show you this. You can see I have another tracking here. This is my Way of Mok'Nathal. Now, it doesn't last particularly long. It lasts 10 seconds. And if you're taking Way of Mok'Nathal, Raptor Strike is something you're definitely going to want to be weaving in at least 10 seconds to keep this buff going. So you can probably already see the idea that if we've got Flanking Strike and we're trying to keep Mongoose windows open, right, and we're trying to keep Lacerate ticking, is that you end up very much, you see the way I'm spinning plates now, I'm like reprioritizing where do my hands need to be in order to get all the benefit of all these abilities, right? And it becomes very, very apparent very quickly why some people just find this spec a bit of a hassle, honestly, compared to the other specs out there, particularly BM and MM, my Beast Mastery and Marksman. A lot of people don't prefer this, especially the other melee classes don't really have this much ability bloat, is what we'll call it, ability bloat. Because all these spells are useful, but keeping them all rocking and rolling is a lot of effort for what currently at the moment isn't giving as much benefit as we would probably like damage-wise. Certainly you're going to get more damage from a Hunter through Marksman and BM. So that's Way of Mok'Nathal. If you're going like pure single target for the most part, right? Certainly if you're not going to be changing targets all the time, which means reapplying stuff, that's the way you got to think about it, is in terms of button presses. If you're swapping around and doing stuff and reapplying things, then keeping Raptor Strike going at the same time is just a mega hassle. And if it's falling down, you're going to have to restack it up and all that kind of stuff. You need to get really comfortable with Way of Mok'Nathal to keep it going and keep a good uptime on that buff, because obviously you want it, then you're going to drift away. But if you're going for like a boss, a single target boss and stuff like that, or your early days playing survival, try and get used to Way of Mok'Nathal so you can use it better in later stages of the game. Throwing axes. Throwing axes toss 3 axes at the enemy, each dealing 145,000 physical damage with 2 charges and a 13-second recharge. Very cheap, very nasty, nothing particularly interesting about it, but it does add yet another button to your bars. It does add yet another button, which is certainly off-putting, and the damage isn't that great either. Animal Instincts, though, is just buffing Flanking Strike. So Flanking Strike also reduces the remaining cooldown by 3 seconds of a random one of the following abilities. So that'll be Flanking Strike itself, Mongoose Bite, Aspects of the Eagle, Harpoon. Now, I should mention Harpoon here. It's our gap closer, but it is also tied to your DPS. When you harpoon a target, you debuff it with On the Trail. It's not a lot of damage, but it is up permanently. It's a bleed effect, dealing damage. Melee attacks extend this effect by 6 seconds per melee attack. Okay, so you need to be harpooning in to get this damage in there. It's not a great deal, but it certainly adds up over time. So Animal Instincts is going to reduce the cooldown of one of those things, which is always beneficial, particularly if you're doing Mythic Plus or something like that, where you're going to be swapping around and doing Mongoose Bite windows. Aspects of the Eagle is our main DPS cooldown, of course, which grants you and your pet 20% increased critical strike chance on all abilities, and your pet's attacks have an additional 25% chance to grant you charges of Mongoose Bite. So it's a good DPS cooldown because we obviously want to get to 6 mongoose bites very quickly. If I just do a simple demonstration, is if I was to pop my DPS cooldown here and then go in there, you can see that my mongoose bites are refreshing as I'm putting them down. 1, 2, 1, 2, and then we're up to 5. And there's another one, there's the 6, and then I can go into the Fury of the Eagle. And you can see what I was talking about earlier with this slight extension of the window. Very cool. And then you can throw in some big mongoose bites to finish up. Always be careful of this, though. It's a nightmare. The window's about to close. You want to squeeze that one last big 6-stat mongoose bite in there, and the window closes as you do it, and you reopen the next window, and you don't have any mongoose bite charges to go into. But as you can see, they recharge pretty quickly. Excuse me. Moving down then. So, Murder of Crows, very cool ability. Very cool ability. 30 focus, 1 minute cooldown, useful by all hunter specs in most cases, getting great use out of it. And Murder of Crows cooldown is reset if the target dies, does big damage. Very nice, lots of opportunities to use that. Mortal Wounds, though, each time your Lacerate deals damage, you have a 2% chance to gain a charge of Mongoose Bite. So Lacerate used to be tied to one target if you're watching this and you tried Survival Early Legion. It's not anymore. You actually can lacerate multiple targets, which means you can get, if you're doing like AoE, lacerating multiple targets and getting lots of mongoose bites is actually pretty goddamn good. So that's going to depend on the content you're doing. If you have the opportunity to lacerate targets for a reasonable amount of time, then you're going to get all these extra mongoose bites, which is going to lead to big windows, big damage. Very cool. Snake Hunter is your big DPS cooldown, okay? If you can work it properly, and if you need the extra charges of mongoose bite. So I talked earlier about the mastery. Mastery is going to be naturally giving you Mongoose Bite charges, and Mortal Wounds can also provide a steady stream of Mongoose Bite charges, depending on content. But with Snake Hunter, it's only a 2-minute cooldown and instantly grants you 3 more. So you'll find more benefit of trying to weave this in if you're not getting that steady stream of Mongoose Bites, and you want to keep propping them up and using very short, very heavy burst windows. You'll find good opportunity there. Again, we put some recommended builds in the background. I just want you to understand the usefulness of these. Level 45, I agree with most people who I spoke to about survival. Obviously, people knew survival was coming away to talk to me about it. That disengage is pretty much the only choice. You already have Harpoon as a gap closer, and disengage gets you out of trouble real fast. Harpoon also frees you from all movement. If we talk about post-haste this time, it is not the same as BM and Marksman. It frees you from all movement impairing effects and increases your movement speed by 60%. You don't need it, that's the thing. Like, if you find a reason for it, sure, spec it. But most of the time, between Harpoon and the ability to disengage wherever you want to go, you're not really going to use this at all. We still do have aspects of the cheetah for whatever garbage use it has. I mean, it is an on-demand sprint if you should need it. Trailblazer, though, your movement speed is increased by 30% anytime you have not attacked for 3 seconds. Okay. Great. Great. As I said, work in progress. Work in progress, sure. Level 60 then, we get some extra AoE in the form of caltrops. Okay, so we throw caltrops down, and throwing traps is amazing. You should always appreciate this animation where it like lands and then slides. It's so cool. Throw the explosive. That slide effect. It's very awesome. So, caltrops. You scatter caltrops in an area for 15 seconds. Enemies who stab into caltrops will take bleed damage every second and have 70% reduced movement speed. Very nice when you're doing AoE. Very cool ability. It's only a 12-second cooldown. You can throw it down and just throw out mass bleeds on lots of targets. Guerrilla Tactics. Explosive Trap deals 50% more damage. And Waylay's effects are further strengthened. So, Explosive Trap causes the target to miss their next 2 melee attacks. You're going to take this, like, if a single target, pretty much. Steel Trap is an extra trap that actually does some very cool things, which is where you mostly want to use this for a single target, if I'm being honest. What we're working through here, like, Guerrilla Tactics is kind of okay, but you compare, it's so obvious which one you want to choose for the most part, but I just want you to read them properly. So, Guerrilla Tactics is kind of, it's alright. Steel Trap, however, it hurls a steel trap to the target location that immobilizes the first enemy that approaches for 30 seconds and deals 685,000 bleed damage. Other damage may break the immobilization effect, but will not stop the bleed effect. Waylay, fully arms after 2 seconds, dealing 500% increased damage if triggered by an enemy that is not in combat. So you can throw it down where it's going to trigger. So it's just the clear winner. Right? It's the clear winner. You should be able to read these and go, okay, this makes total sense to me now because they make so much obvious damage. So Guerrilla Tactics, not so much compared to these two, right? Not so much. Level 75, some CC, pick whatever you like. Let's talk about butchery. So in the midst of trying to create survival, as you can already tell, and I hope you can tell, there's a hodgepodge of abilities thrown in here. One, they wanted to keep this nostalgia of the original Survival Hunter from 12 years ago, but it also had to be brought up to the modern era. Obviously, people wanted to go very trap-focused, other people wanted to go kind of animal-focused with it, and melee-focused, which is why nothing really stands out as the clear winner in terms of balanced damage. I talked earlier about how it skews so heavily towards Mongoose Bite. Butchery is basically, this is what you get for this is what you do to AoE, right? And I'm sure many of you have heard of Butchery, or even seen me when I had like an 870 Survival Hunter going and doing 4 or 5 million DPS or something stupid on Scorpion when we did that on stream. And the fact is, Butchery just smashes things in AoE. So typically you have an AoE spell called Carve, very much like Cleave for a warrior have. If you're going to be doing regular AoE, dungeons, things like that, you take Butchery. It's all good and well talking about all this other stuff, but essentially a lot of the Survival Hunter unfortunately boils down to 1 or 2 spells, which should free you up from being super annoyed about stuff coming off cooldown and waiting a second or so before it's used. But in other areas, like myself, I just find it a kind of cheap system, to be honest. So it strikes all nearby enemies in a flurry of strikes, inflicting 450,000 physical damage to each of them. It's stupid how powerful this ability is, and it looks crap. It's like the worst. It's like a half Blade Storm and a half Whirlwind animation is basically what they've given it. But it does absolutely ludicrous damage when you're hitting multiple targets. Absolutely ludicrous. Dragon's Fire Grenade used to be quite popular, not so popular anymore. 30-second cooldown, it hurls a grenade at the target, does 700,000 fire damage over 8 seconds, and reduces movement speed. All right, 30-second cooldown. The unfortunate truth is, if you're going to be AoEing, you're going to be using Butchery, because it just does so much stupid damage. It only takes 2 targets to beat this, and you can actually charge. You can do it back to back to back. Serpent Sting, targets hit by your Raptor Strike and Carve are also affected by Serpent Sting, dealing 365,000 nature damage over 15 seconds. So this is yet another plate spinner, but if you're going to be doing single target, remember for AoEing, we're probably going towards Butchery and Animal Instincts anyway. If you're going single target, then you pick up Serpent Sting. And the reason we do this should be pretty obvious, because if we're single targeting, you're more than likely using Way of Mok Nathal. And that means that you're Raptor Striking a lot, which means you're naturally now applying the dot of Serpent Sting. So Serpent Sting still exists in the game. It's still around. Come here, pet boy. Thank you. And you just get this passive poison effect, essentially, when you're doing your Raptor Strikes, which you're going to be doing anyway for Way of Mok Nathal, which is just, that's the way it is. Yeah, target by a Raptor Strike and Carve are also affected by Serpent Sting, and they'll just tick. You can see the debuff up here. I don't even track it, because I'm only using it if I'm using Way of Mok Nathal, and if I'm using Way of Mok Nathal, I'm naturally doing Serpent Sting. So that's something I've actually cut out on my bars, because there's already enough information for me to track here as a Survival Hunter. That's entirely up to you whether you want to do that. Moving down to level 100 then, you're going to be taking Spitting Cobra in nearly all scenarios, even if you're doing like Mythic Plus and stuff, but there is some variation here. Summons a Cobra for 30 seconds that attacks your target for damage every 2 seconds. While the Cobra is active, you gain extra 3 focus. So Butchery is very expensive. It's 40 focus, right? It's really, really expensive. So if you're AoEing, the Spitting Cobra comes in handy just to gain that extra focus to keep your Butcheries going. And when it comes to single targeting, where you're using Way of Mok Nathal and trying to get flanking strikes in there, which cost 50 focus, having that extra focus is worthwhile as well. Expert Trapper, though. If you're doing loads and loads of AoE, which you could be doing, you're increasing Caltrops damage by 50%. Great. Explosive Traps damage to the triggering enemy by 75% is increased. You just get these passive damage bonuses. However, Spitting Cobra is generally better in vast majority. I don't want to say all, because we already have enough trouble with people trying to pick apart every word I say in the videos. So I'm just going to say in nearly all, because if I say all, somebody will find a scenario for Expert Trapper. So just be aware of what it does. Aspects of the beast then. Flanking Strike causes an additional effect based on your pet specialization. For the target also bleeds if you're a Ferocity pet, which is your damage one. Your tank pet also takes 30% reduced damage for 6 seconds. And Cunning, of course, for the stealthier one. The target's movement speed is also reduced for your PvP bro. So you do have those options there. Those are the talent choices you can go with. So a very standard build of what we were showing you in the background. So if you're going single target, yeah, you're probably looking at something very, very similar to this. This would be like a standard single target build that most people would go with. If you're doing like dungeons or something like that, you can take this. You can keep Murder of Crows or Morsel Wounds, depending on how much AoE you're going to be doing. Yeah, it's all about spreading those lacerates if you take that. Picking up caltrops, picking up butchery, and looking something very much like this. But of course, mix and match depending on the content, how long things are going to live, how much benefit you're getting from them, how much your gear affects it, also affects your talent choices. Okay, guys? So, having said that, let's take a look at all this mishmashy spinning gameplay. So gameplay-wise, it's not the easiest thing in the world. You're constantly shifting and reprioritizing what you're going to be pressing. So some basics then, you want to keep Raptor Strike on cool, Lacerate ticking, right? You want to keep Lacerate ticking, you want to keep your Flanking Strike going, and then you're going to be looking for opportunities to throw in these Mongoose Bites. Now remember, once you've opened the Mongoose Bite window, you're semi-committed to getting the best use out of it. Trying to get to 6, using Fury of the Eagle to back that up. Now you'll notice things like this happen where your Lacerate falls off for a second, and then you've got to make choices as to what you want to do next. Obviously, you don't want Mongoose Bite to ever be sitting at 3 charges. You don't want that. That's just missing out on procs, which leads to the big damage, and no matter what you say, most of your damage is going to be coming from Mongoose Bite. Yeah, you want to fit as many in. Then you get these sort of cooler periods where things slow down. That's when you can start using your traps and things, keeping Flanking Strike going there, and then you go, okay, I'm at 2 stacks, feeling pretty good about things. Boom, I'm going back into the Mongoose window. So you're riding these waves. Essentially, you're riding these waves of absolute Zergy spam. Absolute Zergy spam constantly. 2 seconds left. I got the Fury of the Eagle with 1 second left, which is nice. And then you come back out of it, and then you kind of go back into the routine and stuff. But very quickly, as you can see, I'm almost back at 3. We're back into the Mongoose Bite window again. And you're going to be circling like this for the most part in all scenarios. Now, I just want to reiterate, this is like the basic style of play. This is super basic before we take in talents. We're not using Spitting Cobra yet. We're not mixing in Butchery yet if we were AoEing. We're not mixing in Raptor Strikes and keeping Mock Nathals up. But those are all things I've explained to you for you in the talents. I want you to get an understanding of the absolute basics. Obviously, if we're spreading Lacerate and we're taking advantage of Mortal Wounds, then we're going to be doing that. But mostly, we're going into these peaks and troughs where suddenly you're back at 3 Mongoose Bites and you're like, good God, and then we're straight back in, like no opportunity. What you can do is seize some moments, like there, where I had a gap between Mongoose Bites where I could throw down an explosive trap and work in my other abilities. But now I'm at 6, I've got time. Just made it. Oh yeah, just made it. It's a busy, busy spec. Oh, unfortunately, not too long back, actually, I remember someone telling me I was sick of the downtime. There ain't no downtime with this spec, ladies and gentlemen. There ain't no downtime. That was just the basics I showed you there. Mixing in everything else is where it also gets more and more busy. It gets more and more busy with picking everything else up. So I'll do a gameplay video on the daily videos, and you guys can see me go through a dungeon and probably get really stressed out with this spec. Let's move on. The Survival Hunter, my friends. Enjoy it if you dare. My conclusion on the Survival Hunter, for those of you who are dipping your toe in there and seeing what all the fuss is about, or really wanting to give it a go, is that it clearly still has some issues. It has a lot of ability bloat. You can get used to it, absolutely can. If you play it a lot and you really stick it out, you can get used to it. But the unfortunate truth is, of course, there are specs that don't deal with this stuff anyway, and I believe it will change pretty dramatically over the next expansion or so. But I think Blizzard is committed to trying to make this work, so getting used to it now is a good idea. If you're looking for add-ons for survival, what you can obviously see here is there is several things to track. There are several things to track, and you should be working on a Tell Me When, which is what I use, or a Weak Aura, or anything that helps you out to make this process of spinning these plates easier. Don't get too bogged down earlier on with trying to do everything. So if you pick something like the single target build, or you pick something like, Wave Mock Nathal, Snake Hunter, Steel Trap, say Serpent Sting and Spitting Cobra, I guarantee you, if you're not super expert or haven't played it before, you're going to be very overwhelmed at first, and you're thinking, I just came from like a warrior that has like 3 buttons, right, that all seem to flow and make sense together and timed well, and this feels really irritating. Yeah, it can feel that way, but over time it will get better, I'm sure of that. Thank you very much for watching. Enjoy your Survival Hunter, guys. Bye-bye.